The curtain rose into a silence that felt alive. Heat from the spotlight slumped into Jeremy's chest, pinning him in place. Brighter and hotter than he'd imagined in months of rehearsal. Beyond the glare, shadows, 400 of them, faces blurred together, waiting. His grip crumpled in his damp hands. His throat worked, but no sound came. Not a whisper, not a word. The silence grew heavy, pressing down until even the smallest sounds pierced like gunfire. A cough, a shuffle, the sharp rustle of paper. Jeremy's chest locked, his knees bent, ready to flee, run. Something inside him screamed, just run. And then movement. In the back row, a figure shifted, a presence too steady, too deliberate. Jeremy blinked hard against the glare. He swore he saw lips moving in the dark, shaping words he knew, words he couldn't force out. The theater seemed to lean closer, waiting to devour him whole. For one suspended heartbeat, he stood between collapse and something else, something impossible. He could have run, he almost did. But who was the figure in the shadows? And why did it feel like they had been waiting for him? Have you ever faced a moment where silence said everything, and you didn't know if you'd rise or fall? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, hit subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. 3 months earlier, Jeremy Martinez never intended to audition for the school play. Theater was for the confident kids, the ones who filled the room without trying, who spoke without worrying which syllable might betray them. Jeremy was the boy who sank into the back row, who rationed words like currency, afraid each one might unravel him. But Miss O'Neill, the drama teacher, saw something he didn't. During English class, when Jeremy read the Hamlet soliloquy aloud, slowly, carefully, but with an ache that silenced the room, she noticed. She cornered him as the bell rang. "I need you to audition," she said, her eyes lit with the kind of faith Jeremy had never earned. I can't," he stammered, heat rising up his neck. "Can't or won't?" The words lodged in him, sharper than she knew. Can't mean broken, won't mean choice. The question followed him for days, until it stopped sounding like hers and started sounding like his own. So he auditioned, badly. His voice cracked at the emotional peak. He forgot a line and stumbled back. But something in the rawness caught Miss O'Neill's attention. Against all odds, she cast him as Thomas, the lead in Crossing Bridges, a play about a young man finding courage to save his family. The announcement set Jefferson High buzzing. Jeremy Martinez, the kid who barely talks? Even Dr. Hayes, the principal, warned Miss O'Neill, "If he freezes on opening night, it's your reputation on the line." Miss O'Neill only smiled. "Talent isn't about perfection," she told Jeremy. "It's about truth. And you, Jeremy, are the most real actor I've met." He wasn't alone. Cassie Thompson, the stage manager and Jeremy's only true friend, became his quiet coach. She slipped sticky notes into his script. "Breathe. Scared is just excitement without air. You're braver than you think." At home, the house was too quiet. His mother worked late at the diner. His father was long gone. Jeremy whispered lines to his reflection in a cracked mirror. His voice was the only sound beside the refrigerator's hum. Once, he saw his mother asleep in her car, still in uniform, an image seared into him. Her bent shoulders, her sacrifices, and the silent promise he made. Don't let her down. He pushed harder. Each night, he told his reflection. Tomorrow you'll be brave. And for a moment, under the dim glow of a flickering bulb, he almost believed it. But as opening night crept closer, the dread returned, the same dread that had clung to him since fifth grade, when one mispronounced word had turned him into a punchline. The night before the performance, Jeremy sat alone at his desk, script open, heart pounding. He pressed both hands flat against the paper as if to steady himself. Don't choke, he whispered. His voice cracked against the silence. Not again. Outside, the wind rattled his window. Inside, the mirror caught his reflection, pale and tense. A boy rehearsing not just lines but survival. Tomorrow, he would step into the light. What he didn't know was that someone else was already waiting in the dark. The hour before curtain call, Jefferson High's backstage area buzzed with controlled chaos. Costume racks clogged the narrow hallways. Makeup tables overflowed with brushes and half-empty bottles of foundations. The air smelled of stage powder, sweat, and teenage nerves mixed with too much cologne. Jeremy sat in the corner like a shadow, script clutched in his damp hands, lips moving silently through his opening monologue. His pulse hammered in his throat, every syllable rehearsed 100 times but still fragile as glass. Around him, his castmates laughed, traded inside jokes, and practiced tongue twisters with exaggerated bravado. They thrived in the noise, in the spotlight he feared. Their confidence felt like another world, a place Jeremy could never quite belong. Places in 10 minutes, Cassie called out, clipboard in hand, headset crooked across her messy ponytail. The command rolled off her tongue like she'd been born for it, and in that moment, she looked older than 17, older than him, older than the fear he couldn't shake. Jeremy adjusted his costume, just jeans and a flannel shirt, simple enough, but it felt like armor he didn't know how to wear. Through the thin walls came the muffled rumble of the audience, hundreds of voices, overlapping, waiting. The sound was enough to drag him back. Mrs. Patterson's classroom, 5th grade, a 3-minute presentation on his favorite animal. Jeremy had chosen Tyrannosaurus Rex. He'd drawn pictures, memorized facts, and practiced until he could almost believe he was ready. But when he stood before the class, his voice betrayed him. Tyranno. The word lodged in his throat, jagged as bone. He tried again and again, but the laughter came anyway. Siler Jenkins stood up, stuttering in mockery, and the room roared. Jeremy had fled straight into the bathroom, locking the stall, staring at his red, wet face in the mirror. That was the day he swore never again. Never in front of people. Never where words could turn against him. And yet, here he was, 6 years later, minutes away from stepping onto a stage in front of 400 people. 5 minutes to places. Cassie's voice cut through his thoughts. She caught his eye, crossed the crowded space, and crouched down until she was level with him. You okay? Jeremy tried to smile, but it faltered. Just nervous. That's normal. You know what's not normal? How good you are at this. I've done theater for years, and I've never seen someone connect like you do. What if I freeze? Then you freeze, she shrugged. And then you keep going. That's what actors do. What if I can't? For a moment, Cassie was quiet, her steady gaze grounding him. Then you're still you, still my friend, still the guy who is brave enough to stand here and try. Her words should have helped. They did a little, but his chest was still tight, his throat still raw. Through the curtain, Miss O'Neill welcomed the audience, her voice bright and commanding. Jeremy peered through the narrow gap in the drape and spotted his mother. Third row, blue dress, she only wore to church. She had left work early, sacrificing tips she badly needed to be here. She was smiling. That made his chest ache more than the fear, because what if he failed in front of her? The house lights dimmed. A hush fell over the audience. The curtain rose, and then something close to magic. For 20 minutes, Jeremy vanished. He wasn't the boy who stuttered or the kid mocked in hallways. He was Thomas. His voice steady, his movements sure. He hit every line, every mark. When the audience laughed with him, the thrill nearly lifted him off his feet. Cassie beamed from the wings. Miss O'Neill nodded like a proud general. For the first time in years, Jeremy felt something like belonging. But then came the moment, the monologue, the one line on the script that stared back at him like a dare. Thomas's confession, a son confronting his father's death, vowing to step into the role of protector. It demanded not just performance, but vulnerability. Jeremy walked at the center stage. The spotlight poured over him, hot and merciless. The silence stretched across the theater as the audience leaned in, waiting. He inhaled. He felt the words gather in his chest. He could see them in his mind. All he had to do was release them. My father always said, and then impact. The stutter slammed into him like a fist. His throat locked. The words knotted together, heavy and jagged. He tried again. Nothing. The silence swelled, thick and suffocating. A cough broke from the third row. Paper rustled. The smallest sounds cracked like thunder. Jeremy's eyes found his mother. Her smile was gone. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles glowed white. Panic glowed up his chest. His body remembered fifth grade, remembered humiliation, remembered the bathroom mirror and the boy who swore never again. You're not different, the voice hissed. You're the same scared kid. You don't belong here. He froze. The spotlight was no longer light. It was interrogation, exposure. He could feel 400 eyes boring into him, faceless in the dark, waiting for him to prove he was a fraud. Seconds dragged like hours. Sweat beaded along his temple, trickled down his cheek, each drop like the tick of a clock he couldn't stop. His legs trembled. His script pocketed against his thigh crinkled. Useless. Cassie from the wings mouthed the line, urging him forward. Miss O'Neill leaned forward in her seat, wheeling him on. His mother's lips moved in silent prayer. Jeremy opened his mouth once more. Air came, but no words, only silence. And the silence wasn't neutral. It was empty. It was judgment. It was a verdict. The theater held its breath, and Jeremy Martinez stood center stage, drowning in the one thing he feared most. The silence pressed down like the theater itself was holding its breath. 400 faces blurred, but Jeremy felt their judgment. His mother leaned forward, knuckles wide. Backstage, Miss O'Neill's clipboard trembled, and Cassie hovered near the curtain, caught between panic and resolve. And then, clap! One sharp, deliberate sound. It rang out from the farthest row, clean as a church bell, slicing through the suffocating quiet. Jeremy's head jerked upward. At the very back of the house, half shrouded in shadow, a man stood, tall, weathered, silver hair catching the faint glow of the exit sign. His eyes locked on Jeremy's like a spotlight no one else could see. The man's lip moved silently, words Jeremy knew by heart. My father always said, Jeremy's throat tightened, his chest constricted, and yet, impossibly, something in that steady gaze cracked the lock that panic had welded shut. "My father always said," Jeremy whispered, his voice so faint it barely carried past the footlights. The man nodded once, firmly, as though to say yes, you can. His lips moved again. "That courage isn't the absence of fear." "That courage isn't the absence of fear," Jeremy repeated, louder now, his voice trembling but alive. "It's moving forward despite it. It's moving forward despite it." The rhythm returned, fragile at first, like glass balance on the edge of a table, but then stronger, steadier. Jeremy leaned into the words, each one pulled from the stranger's silent coaching. His stutter flickered, present, threatening but no longer absolute. Each stumble became part of the character, part of Thomas's truth. The audience shifted in their seats, confusion melting into awe. They had come to watch a high school play. Instead, they were watching a boy fight for his voice in real time and win. The silence transformed, no longer suffocating but reverent, crystalline. "I never thought I'd be the one to take care of everyone," Jeremy said, tears rising unbidden. His gaze snapped again to the man in the shadows, whose face lined, kind, achingly familiar, remained steady. "I was supposed to be the one who needed taking care of." The words flowed now, rough but unstoppable, like a river finding its course after years of drought. The monologue unfurled in its entirety. Every pause, every crack in his voice felt honest, earned. Jeremy wasn't reciting anymore. He was living it. And when the final line fell from his lips, not becoming fearless, just becoming willing to be afraid for the right reasons, the theater erupted. The applause was thunder, not polite but primal, as though the entire audience needed to release what they'd been holding inside. Jeremy bowed, chest heaving, sweat cooling on his skin, relief and disbelief tangled in his veins. He dared one last glance at the back row, empty. The man was gone. Backstage, Cassie grabbed his arm, shaking him with excitement. "Holy cow, Jeremy! That was incredible! You turned that silence into the most powerful moment of the play." Jeremy swallowed hard. "Cassie, did you see him? The man in the back row?" She frowned. "What man? Nobody stood up during your scene. I had a clear view from the wings." Jeremy's blood ran cold. His voice came out hoarse. "But he was there. Silver hair. He knew every word." Cassie laughed lightly, mistaking his panic for nerves. "Then, maybe you've got a guardian angel." But Jeremy's heart thudded in his chest. Because guardian angels don't clap. They don't mouth your lines word for word. And they don't vanish the moment you need to thank them. The applause still thundered in his ears, but underneath it, Jeremy heard something else, a whisper, a voice he couldn't explain, echoing in the hollow of his chest. Not a savior, not a stranger, someone who knew him, someone who shouldn't be here. The night air outside Jefferson High was warm, heavy with cut grass and distant traffic. Jeremy lingered by the stage door, still in costume, script crumpled in restless hands. Applause echoed faintly in his chest, but beneath it throbbed the collapse he'd barely survived. He wasn't sure if he should feel proud or ashamed or both. A scrape of a shoe against brick made him turn. "You did well tonight, son." The voice came from the shadows at the corner of the building. Jeremy's heart thudded as the figure stepped forward. The man from the back row, silver hair, weathered lines around his eyes. and that steady look that had carried Jeremy across the tightrope of silence. Up close, the man looked older than he'd seen in the theater. 60s, maybe even 70s. His shirt was simple, sleeves rolled at the forearms, and in his hands he held something Jeremy hadn't noticed before, a thick leather-bound book, edges frayed, corners softened by decades of touch. "You were there," Jeremy whispered. "You helped me." The man nodded. "Name's Robert Dorsey, and yes, I was there, though I'm not sure anyone else would say so." "What does that mean?" Robert studied him for a moment, then glanced back at the darkened marquee above the school doors. 37 years ago, I was you, standing under the lights. Community theater, death of a salesman, Willie Noman, the role of a lifetime, or so I thought. Jeremy leaned in despite himself. His pulse quickened. First act went smoothly, too smooth, Robert said with a hollow chuckle. Felt invincible. But then the breakdown scene came, the one on which everything hangs. I stepped out there, looked at the crowd, and nothing. Not a word, just silence, thick and choking. My cast tried to save me, bless them, but I was gone, frozen, dead weight. Jeremy's throat tightened in recognition. "What happened after?" he asked. Robert's eye dimmed. "I quit, walked away, told myself the theater wasn't meant for me. Spent the next 37 years haunted by a moment I never faced down." He held out the book. Jeremy took it, the leather warm against the cool night. When he opened it, the pages breathed dust and ink, margins crowded with faded notes. "Slow, breathe. They want you to win. Don't run." Jeremy's fingers lingered on the line circled 3 times. "The silence is not your enemy." His chest ached. "Why give this to me?" Robert's gaze held steady. "Tonight, you did what I never could. You froze, but you didn't run. You let the silence breathe, then broke the room. You turned my greatest fear into something that moved everyone." Jeremy's eyes burned. He clutched the book tighter, afraid it might vanish. "But you helped me," he insisted. "You were mouthing the lines. You knew every word." Robert tilted his head. A shadow of a smile played on his lips. "Was I? Or did you just need to believe someone else understood? Maybe I was never more than that belief." Jeremy blinked. The night suddenly felt colder. Robert stepped closer, his presence both grounding and unreal. "The truth is, Jeremy, freezing isn't the end of a performance. It's just a pause. And pauses don't kill stories. They give them weight." The words settled into Jeremy like stones dropped into water, rippling outward. "But what if it happens again?" Jeremy's voice cracked. "It will," Robert said simply. "Fear doesn't leave. Doubt doesn't leave. But now, you know you can walk through it. That's the difference between an actor and a dreamer." Jeremy swallowed hard. "And if I can't?" Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. His palm felt real, solid, calloused like a craftsman's. "Then you'll still be you. Still, a boy who stood in front of 400 people and tried. But I don't think that's who you are anymore." They stood there in silence, the cicadas humming, the school parking lot emptying one car at a time. Jeremy glanced down at the book again, running his fingers over a water-stained corner where ink had blurred. A note scrawled there caught his eye, hurried and uneven. "If you quit tonight, you'll quit forever." Jeremy looked up sharply. "Robert, did you write this during—" but the space where Robert had stood was empty. Jeremy's breath caught. He spun around, scanning the shadows, the streets, the rows of parked cars. Nothing. No footsteps. No retreating figure. Only the book, heavy in his hands, pages fluttering in the night breeze like wings. A chill worked its way up to his spine. He clutched the script against his chest, torn between gratitude and unease. On the inside cover, in ink darker than the rest, a single line waited for him. For the actor I might have been, and for the actor you're becoming. Jeremy stood frozen under the hum of the street light, heart pounding. Somewhere deep inside, a question rooted itself, sharp and unshakable. Had Robert Dorsey been there at all? Or had Jeremy conjured the very ghost of the man he might become? And if so, what did that mean about the path ahead? And if so, what did that mean about the path ahead? 6 weeks later, Jeremy stood in the same position on the Jefferson High stage, script in hand, leading the first rehearsal for the spring musical. Miss O'Neill had asked him to help with the younger students, middle schoolers, and freshmen who were just discovering theater. Remember, he told a group of nervous kids sitting cross-legged on the stage floor. Acting isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And if you mess up a little, if your voice cracks, if you forget where you're supposed to stand, that's not failure. That's just being human. And humans are what make stories worth telling. A 7th grader named Michael raised his hand sensitively. But what if people laugh? Jeremy smiled, thinking of Tyler Jenkins and that day in 5th grade, of the silence in the theater, of Robert Dorsey's weathered face in the dark. Then they laugh, and then you keep going. Then they laugh, and then you keep going. Because the people who matter, the people worth performing for, they're not laughing at you. They're hoping you succeed. They're rooting for you to find your voice. After the rehearsal, Jeremy walked home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, Robert's script tucked safely in his backpack alongside with his own materials. He'd been carrying it everywhere since that night, not as a crutch, but as a reminder that everyone who'd ever stood on that stage had felt afraid at some point. The difference wasn't in the absence of fear, it was in what you chose to do with it. At home, he found his little sister Rosa sitting at the kitchen table, struggling with her homework. She was 9, the same age Jeremy had been when his stutter first became noticeable, when words began to feel like enemies instead of friends. "Hey Rosa, what you working on?" "Stupid book report," she muttered, not looking up. "I have to present it to the class tomorrow, and I hate talking in front of people. My stomach feels all weird, and I keep forgetting what I want to say." Jeremy sat down across from her, remembering. "What's your report about?" "Dolphins. But every time I practice, I mess up their scientific name. Everyone's gonna think I'm dumb." "You know what I do when I'm scared to perform?" Rosa looked up, curious despite herself. "I practice in the mirror first, but not whispering with my full voice. Wanna try?" They went to the bathroom, Rosa clutching her notes, both of them crowding in front of the same cracked mirror Jeremy had practiced in for months before his play. "Okay," Jeremy said, "pretend I'm your class. Tell me about dolphins." Rosa took a shaky breath and began. "When she stumbled over Thurshop's Truncatus." Jeremy didn't laugh or correct her. He just waited, the way Robert had waited for him that night, until she found her rhythm and tried again. "Better," Jeremy said when she finished. "Now do it again, but this time, look at yourself in the mirror. See how brave you look?" As Rosa practiced, Jeremy caught his own reflection behind her. 6 months ago, that mirror had shown him a boy who whispered his dreams because he was afraid to claim them out loud. Now, he saw something different. Not fearlessness, but the kind of courage that comes from walking through fear and discovering it won't kill you. His phone buzzed with a text from Cassie. Regional theater auditions next month. You in? Jeremy looked at Rosa, still practicing her presentation with growing confidence, and thought about Robert Dorsey's words. Don't let your story end the way mine did. He typed back, absolutely. That night, as he lay in bed, Jeremy could hear Rosa in her room, no longer whispering her report, but speaking it aloud with full voice, preparing to share her passion for dolphins with her class. Through the thin walls, her words carried clearly. Dolphins are some of the most intelligent creatures in the ocean. And Jeremy smiled, thinking about how sometimes it takes one person's willingness to fail publicly to give another person the courage to succeed. Thinking about how sometimes it takes one person's willingness to give another person the courage to succeed. Sometimes the silence isn't the end of the story. It's just the pause before the applause. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show someone else that it's okay to be afraid, as long as you don't let that fear make your choices for you. He pulled Robert's script from his nightstand and opened it to a page he'd marked with a sticky notes. In the margin, in Robert's careful handwriting, were the words, "The stage is just a mirror. The real performance is what you choose to do with your life." As Jeremy drifted towards sleep, he thought of Robert clapping in the shadows, of Rosa practicing dolphins in the mirror, of his own trembling voice that had somehow carried him through. Heroes weren't capes or spotlights. They were small acts, clapping first, steadying someone's voice, refusing to quit when fear clawed at your throat. Everyday heroes are all around us.